Adam, if industrial design were a vintage Mercedes, you would be the leopard skin interior.
And don't forget the fuzzy dice. Welcome to Engineer versus Designer,
The podcast.
for product designers, engineers, makers, geeks, freaks, and people who like the smell of gasoline a little too much for their own good. My name is Adam, industrial designer of CADjunkie.com.
And my name is Josh, mechanical engineer of SolidSmack.com.
Each week's show is broken into 3 hub, slap, and halves. This week, we'll be talking about reverse engineering and the wonderful world of classic car restoration. First, we'll serve up the top product design stories from this week's news, courtesy of SolidSmack.com.
Followed by techie tips, tricks, and Q&A compliments of CADjunkie.com.
And finally, we're going to talk with special guest Stuart Brown from his studio 3D Engineers in the UK, reverse engineering phenom and mythical mastermind, methodically making motorcar masterpieces with modern means.
Classic car guru Stuart Brown, it is a pleasure to have you with us today. If you were pub food, would you be stewed cabbage or mushy peas?
Ooh, mushy peas.
Okay, Stuart, stay put. We'll be hearing more from you as the show goes on. Josh Mings of SolidSmack.com. Speaking of questionable pub fare, the time has come for us to gorge ourselves on the meat pies of knowledge. What have you got for us this week?
This week's SolidSmack Update is brought to you by Geomagic. From steamy scans to turning point clouds to polygons, Geomagic Studio is the fastest, most accurate route from scan to CAD, serving all your reverse engineering software needs at geomagic.com. So, rev up that 3D laser scanner. Numio has put the data optimizing goodness into a new version of Numisoft, their 3D capture software, making their Optinum 3D scanner even more awesome. Locating the scans in 3D space is improved, and file size is cut down by a factor of 16. Scan that.
And Geomagic has been used to create the most accurate 3D model of the ancient monument Stonehenge.
Ooh.
It's the highest resolution scan to date. Geomagic Studio was used by laser scanning specialists Green Hatch Group to scan the massive monoliths, and you can see the 3D at the English Heritage website we're going to link to on EvD.
Infobix has released their Deep Data CAD Search product to the masses. It allows you to search your 3D data from wherever you have web access.
Eris, makers of the open source PLM software, have done the unimaginable, nay, the unthinkable. They have released Eris ePLM. It turns SolidWorks Enterprise PDM into a full-fledged PLM product. This, however, is not open source, sadly.
And RTT, who brings you the high-priced DeltaGen 3D rendering product.
Very high-priced.
Yep, has released a scaled-down product called DeltaPix, which is actually just bunk speed shot repackaged and sold at a lower price.
Nice. And if you're into rings and things, you're going to want to check out iring3d.com, which is an iPad app from Paracloud that allows you to create your own custom jewelry and send it straight to Shapeways or Sculpteo to be printed. Grab the app on iTunes for a measly 5.99 buckaroos. So, Stuart Brown, you work on vintage cars. You actually tipped us off on this Numio software. You do a lot of reverse engineering. Why are you excited about it?
Because it makes my job easier. Essentially, I can turn up purely with a scanner and a laptop. I don't need markers. I don't need numerous PowerPoints. I don't need a lot of space around the subject. I can work in daylight, which is great because I spent half my life in the last few years working in the dark. I don't need to go into, although sometimes you do, but generally speaking, you don't have to go and cover your subject in a white dust. It can be done as it is. I mean, obviously that's not 100% guaranteed, but it tends to work out that way.
And it works with large objects, huh?
Yeah, which is where the new features have come in, because the file size has been dramatically reduced. Objects before that would have represented a problem now don't. I mean, you could do, I'd be happy to do a car with it, put it that way.
Okay, now you have no vested interest in this company because you have just done an amazing job of selling this product to me.
I sell them, but I do, yeah.
Do you really? Okay.
But the way I got into dealing with them was because I was searching for a solution. I found the solution, got the system, then I was asked to go and sell it. So it didn't come about I wanted to sell it, then I used the solution. It was the other way around. So there you go.
And you also use Geomagic, is that correct?
Yes, I do, and I don't sell Geomagic, by the way. I use Geomagic all the time, and it's absolutely fantastic product.
So briefly, how does that work into your reverse engineering workflow?
Well, essentially, I'll go and scan the car or whatever, or a stone, or whatever object it is someone's asking me to capture, and then you go and put the file into the Geomagic software, and in effect post-process the scanned data, so it can then be put into a CAD program. And what I like about Geomagic is that it's very intuitive to use. And to be frank, I hardly even class it as work. It's just it's a really lovely blend of art and science. So you've got the science of making sure that you get the data to the correct accuracy that you need, which the Numio does that well. It's 100 microns plus or minus accuracy. And then when it's in Geomagic, you can literally muck around with the polygons until you get the desired result, fill in holes really easily. Everything you need to do to post-process the data, Geomagic does, and it does it really well. I'm really looking forward to the new software, actually, because I've heard they're bringing out a new version, and I've heard that the way that it handles large point clouds and the speed with which it does it is absolutely incredible.
I've got to see this piece of software because I've heard nothing but amazing things about it from everybody who's mentioned it.
It is fantastic.
It is absolutely amazing.
And in addition to that, I mean, every bit of hardware and software.
But wait, there's more.
There's more. What I like about it is that the equipment, I try not to skimp on the programs and hardware that I use. And what I love about Geomagic, and for that matter, Dell and SolidWorks and Numio, the key, and Modo, the key programs and hardware that I use, is if you have a problem, there's someone at the end of the phone who will, help you out and get it sorted out. And that's a really good factor in what they do.
Okay, guys, time for a pit stop. We'll be right back. This week's CAD Junkie Q&A is brought to you by Geomagic, leading the way in creating digital models of physical parts, cutting costs for design, and improving quality at the same time. Check them out at geomagic.com. Since we're talking about cars today, we thought we'd ask our special guest Stuart Brown, who builds classic cars from scratch, about his approach to Class A surfacing. People get a little bit, shall we say, religious on the subject, but in reality, no matter how perfect your CAD surfaces are, all that really matters in the end is the appearance of the final part. Stuart reverse engineers gorgeous classic car bodies using SolidWorks, which is not typically considered a Class A surfacing tool. Stuart, what is your approach to Class A surfacing in your work, and do you ever feel limited by SolidWorks surfacing tools?
Not at all. No, I definitely don't. And the way you just described the way people, I think the best way to put it, go on about Class A surfacing, I think they get too wrapped up in it as opposed to thinking how the vehicle is going to be built. Quite simply, a lot of that, it just won't be seen. It's just overkill. I mean, obviously, I want to go and create the best surface I possibly can. Of course I do. But if it's not quite as, actually the best way to put it, it's not quite as Ford or Mercedes would want, believe me, it's not going to make any difference when a car is being hand built.
Okay, this is interesting. So, Stuart, what you're saying is that the quality of the surface is really important for visualization, but when a car is being hand built like yours is, they don't need to be as perfect as if you were tooling for manufacturing.
Yeah, essentially, with the surfacing, I want the surfacing to look as, that's what a good way of putting this. With the surfacing, I want it to look as good as possible. And from a visualization point of view, because I use Modo to go and visualize what I do, generally speaking, it's got to be good enough to look good in Modo. You haven't got any obvious join lines, and you've got to do a good job. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But where I think I would fall down, if I'm being completely honest, is that say you went and put the a surface that I do and showed the patch layout, You see some amazing patch layouts in other programs. With my patch layout, it wouldn't look all that fantastic, but it would do the job and absolutely brilliantly. And you've seen some of the work on my website. The cars visualize fantastically.
Jaw dropping.
No, I mean, it goes back to what I said. With the if there was I had somebody who's using Alias and they showed their patch layout, what they've done for their surfacing, it looked just amazing, and my one wouldn't look amazingly terrific. But when you visualize both up, they'd be reasonably equal. But my one would work in the real world, which is an important distinction, because that's what you constantly got to have in the back of your minds. I find that SolidWorks is the best compromise to do that.
Oh, all right. So, Stuart, have you ever considered a career in sales? Because I think SolidWorks is going to want to hire you after this.
Funny enough, but I did it for 14 years. Does it show?
Yeah. Great. And welcome back. Today we're chatting with Stuart Brown, reverse engineer and founder of 3D Engineers in the UK. All right. I have the first question here, it looks like. All right. You didn't, Stuart, you didn't start out re-engineering amazing vintage cars. How did all this come about?
Well, you said you'd have a career in sales, and basically it was really well paid, but ultimately pretty boring. So I went and canned that and took a year out, and because that's the amount of funds I had to before I had to start working again. So I was casting around for something to do, and a friend of mine rang up, very rich guy, and he was thinking about buying an Aston Martin DB4. And I said to him, well, I happen to have a DB4 manual for every part of the car, from the engine to the chassis, the whole thing. And a lot of the parts underneath looked reasonably simple. So I said that old Blackadder line, why don't you make one? So he obviously thought I was a lunatic, because he went out and bought one, and he's had many happy trips on an AA lorry since then. And I couldn't let the idea go, so I started researching programs, and initially went to Rhino, which didn't work for me well at all. I know it's a good program, not like it didn't do what I needed to do, and then I found SolidWorks, and that's how I started to do it. And then I needed essentially I needed this whole thing to pay. So
how do you make that work? Let's talk about that.
So I thought, right, I need a Halo project here. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll hit on a car that's got some plans, and I'll go and make the car. And I thought it'd take me about a year to do the Bugatti. I hit on the Bugatti, and I literally turned up at the Bugatti Trust, who've got the plans for this car, and came up with this idea. As opposed to them thinking I was a lunatic, they said, yeah, right, you can do that. And they started lending me the plans. Nice. And actually, that's not really true. I started buying the plans, and after a few months, they started to lend them to me. And this year project actually took about 3 years. There was so many parts; it was ridiculous.
Wow.
There was about 2,800 parts in the car in the end.
Wait! 2,800 parts? You built every
single part, even the bits of the clock.
That is ridiculous.
Everything, every washer, every...
That is a nice way to get your feet wet in the design field. Jeez. Oh my
God. And but the thing was, then you've got your stage set. Then you've done something, and it actually worked out in conjunction with that. What I did was again, without trying to sell SolidWorks too much, but I went and bought a training passport because I never used CAD before, and did every course, did every exam.
Wait. You did the SolidWorks training after you already scratch built 2,800 classic car components? and you never used CAD before?
Never.
I'm sorry, this is just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
I thought, how difficult could it be? But
my jaw just disconnected again.
So basically, I had the idea. I'm one of those people where, like, as opposed to say,
I agree. You are one of those people.
But the thing was, the great thing was, in a period of 3 years, every possible CAD problem I dealt with. on a
Yeah.
favorite subjects, so it worked out really well. So that's how I got into it.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about the process? I mean, somebody comes to you and says they want a certain car built. What's the next steps? How do you start this out?
Well, essentially, what tends to happen is that someone will approach you and they've got an idea in their head, and they're a little bit like blinkered horses. Like they'll have heard about scanning, so they'll think everything's got to be scanned, or they'll have heard about there's some plans knocking around for the car, so all the things have got to come from plans. But what tends to form in my head is I collate what information is about, and then just work out the best way of dealing with that. So, for example, I mean, the first car I designed as a new old car was the Mitchell Special, and the client's brief was literally he gave me 50 pictures of cars he liked and 50 pictures of cars he hated, and said, "Go ahead and make me something that's like that, but not like any of them." So that was my brief. And he'd already built the chassis, and this relates back to what I was just saying. He was like, "We'll get the chassis laser scanned." But the most effective way of dealing with that was to literally just sit in his workshop with a little trestle table and your laptop and a tape measure, and just get on and do it. There was no point in going to...
I've got my 3D scanner right here. It's called a caliper.
Exactly right. And that's a lot of what I do, is that, like, there's a lot of people out there who like specialize. I'm not knocking them, because everyone, specializing is a good thing in lots of ways, but they'll specialize in scanning, or they'll specialize in CAD, or they'll be a designer. But really, to go and, when you're dealing with projects where people haven't got a whole heap of money, you tend to have to be very good at a range of different things, and be able to think laterally, as opposed to cranking out the scanner and saying, "Yeah, there's a great big fee, and what you can do with the data."
And you don't actually hand form the body panels, right? You outsource that?
No, if you gave me all the best forming tools, and from now till Christmas, I'd end up with something that looked like Jeremy Clarkson had made it. No, I haven't got that. I did have a try, and well, I was rubbish.
What have you discovered about the design process here that has really shocked you, and what have people asked you to scan that has really shocked you?
Well, I was asked to scan a certain part of a worker's anatomy, but I swerved on that one. But the things that shock me, I guess, are the way that people generally want to start building things before everything's sorted out properly. They've got this real urge to go and create stuff on the workshop floor, because they see that as getting somewhere. Whereas my philosophy is that you get all the design sorted out to the nth degree. I mean, it doesn't take all that long, but to the nth degree, and then you start building stuff. I can't see the point in building things before you've gone and checked and double checked everything. I'm definitely a measure twice kind of person.
Well, in a real sense, you're bringing dead languages back to life. What are people's reaction when they hear and see the completed project for the first time, or any of the cars that you've recreated?
It's just incredible. It's all sorts of emotions. I've had people cry, not with sadness, but with happiness, and just can't believe it that something they've envisaged is actually there in front of them.
Well, having CAD tools to restore these vintage automobiles is no doubt changing the automotive industry, right? So it's in terms of being able to restore so many rare parts and the entire cars, where do you see this heading in like 10 to 20 years?
That's a good question. I think that even over the last a good example is, I'll probably get the figures wrong, but Google Pictures. Google Pictures, when they first started, I believe they had, it was something like 2 million pictures. Within 5 years, they had 2.5 million or something, and now it's whatever figure it is, some exponentially larger number. And what you're finding is that a lot of information is coming out that was never available to you before. So what I can see is that impossible cars that were designed but never made, recreations of cars that people are really keen on, like AC Cobras or Ferraris, will become more economical.
Wow, this has just been incredible, Stuart, and having you on the show has been even better than that time I launched a 1988 Datsun hatchback off an embankment at 82 miles per hour Thanks so much for being with us.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
Well, folks, if it's not a rainstorm, it's equipment failure. This week's Adam's mic crapped out on him halfway through the show, so closing credits are all mine this week. Engineer versus Designer appreciates all the comments you haven't left yet. In fact, this week we'll send another Engineer versus Designer shirt to the first person who does. Head over to engineerversusdesigner.com and let it rip. Insults are welcome. And if you want to see us locked in a truck with nothing but a can of castor oil and the promise of eternal solitude, be sure to like us, +1 us, follow us, or whatever, as social media has been correlated with oily skin and loneliness. A big special thanks to Raymond Martin for the mellow blues licks in the background. We'll see you next week, and remember, without engineers, designers would sip their wine on structurally deficient chairs.
And without designers, engineers would slurp beer in homes entirely furnished with cinder blocks and kibble spools.
See you next week.